Welcome to the Think Fit, Be Fit podcast, part of the Think Fit, Be Fit podcast network, where we put the power of dynamic fitness back in your hands one mental rep at a time. Effective thinking for potent fitness. Welcome to the show.
Today I sit down with Ben Dragavon, former Major League Soccer goalkeeper who runs Dragavon Performance and works with Goalkeeper Complete. He is a muscle system and joint specialist who has worked at the national level with goalkeepers like Hope Solo and has evolved to working with Major League Baseball players and several other types of athletes. He is a seasoned professional in giving athletes an edge in efficiency, athletic development, and career longevity. He is also my friend and a repeat guest here at Think Fit, Be Fit. You can check out his full bio at dragavonperformance.com, check out our previous episodes linked in the show notes, or give him a shout at Dragavon Performance on Instagram. In this episode, we discuss a lot of things really, but a very important topic of mental wellness and physical wellness. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Thanks for being here. All right, here we are again. Ben Dragavon, thank you so much for coming back to Think Fit, Be Fit.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yes, I just love that I've created this space where I can have fun and have intellectual conversations with my colleagues that I've, like you, that I've grown these relationships with over the years. And it's fun for me to go into like details about your thought process, your training process, and, share, my reflections and what's going on my side of the country and, working with similar athletes. And so it's fun for me to have these conversations. So yeah, thank you for being here.
What's interesting is that we are at over a decade now of knowing each other.
Oh my God. Well, you look the same and very young and full of life. So good for you.
I'm glad I look that way because that's not the reality.
That's how I feel. Yeah. Dang. Yeah, that is a decade. Yeah. Because we just have to look at like class dates, right? And you're like, okay, where's that notebook? I still have it for some reason.
Yeah.
And, I don't truly remember what we did in our last episode, but I walked away inspired and taking a hard look at education for fitness professionals and like the responsibility in that realm. I want to say we went deep into your thought process in general, but as usual, like I can continue to go down these rabbit holes with you. And I think honestly, if you and I were hanging out and having a drink or whatever, we would either be talking about this stuff or your dogs. So I think this is, I just love like the honesty there, because like, I think that's what's so cool about podcasts is like you feel like you are having like, coffee or a drink with the people like it, recording the conversation. So
yeah, for sure. definitely my dogs.
Yeah. So anyways, I thought when we were kind of, throwing some ideas around, I really wanted to touch base on like what you've been up to this past year, how your process has evolved or, maybe gone back to something that you were doing 10 years ago that you forgot about. So what's been new for your practice in the past year?
In the past year, well, I think just like everyone else navigating COVID and how to maybe not only grow your practice, but operate in new normals within that practice has been a shared challenge for all of us in this industry, right? New mandates, especially in the area and the part of the country that we're in, that they're pretty specific on what you can and cannot do, and who can't come into your facility, and following all those rules and doing that appropriately has been not overly challenging, but it has just created a new dynamic of how we operate our facility. It's not free willy-nilly. Everyone come in and you can work out, do whatever you want. It's you want to be safe and appropriate with whatever we're doing. So that's something we've had to adapt to. In terms of business growth, bringing people in, like I just discussed with you, it has its challenges because now you're trying to educate someone on maybe technical skills that you have evolved with or adapted to yourself, and it's kind of your own flavor on something, and you're trying to learn how to teach it to somebody else, which kind of challenges you to challenge yourself, I suppose, and how you're thinking and making sure you're actually doing what you think you're doing. Because now you actually have to teach it to somebody, and you have to teach it to another practitioner versus just, sometimes with a client, you go, well, you can play it off a little bit if it wasn't the right thing to do or whatever.
Yeah.
But that makes you, again, learn more about yourself and learn about what you're actually doing, which is a real positive to challenge yourself in that way. And just as we discussed, challenge some fears that you may have or some insecurities and with what you actually were doing, and go, okay, I need to dive into this a little bit more. That has been fun, I suppose. It's necessary for growth. And then really diving in, not just to the technical work of working with a human body, but integrating the mental and the physical, and diving into that relationship and exploring those avenues of training as well, because I think they're necessarily complementary and they need to be addressed.
Yeah. On my intake form for any of the services, and I even ask like younger athletes this, as well as like 70-year-olds, it's when you are exercising, you are also training your body and mind. And I just ask them, have you considered this before? That your body and mind are part of your exercise? And it's just a yes, no, but it kind of gives me a idea of, how to approach a conversation about some important things that may come up in our sessions. So I've definitely considered that. And I mean, you could even say, that specific line, is adapted from our friend and colleague, Jacques, right? When you're training.
For sure.
Yeah. And to have like a whole extra definition of the mind as well, I think is pretty evolved. And if one of my clients is already thinking about that, man, I want to know, because it helps me, talk about that relationship that you just mentioned of mind-body performance, health.
And that question itself is brilliant in a lot of ways, because you can learn so much from their answer. And then you can dive into that and go, does this person even have the capability to think on that level? And if they don't, you may be missing big chunks of the puzzle that may be limiting what their overall performance could be or their ability to get well. Because if psychologically they can't get to a level where they can really feel and understand what is going on within their body, how do you know how to help them?
Yeah, I think I kind of start the conversation with, I just like introduce the idea the placebo effect is not something that we should dismiss. I think it should be like welcomed into anything that you're doing. Yeah, because it's been kind of demonized in the past. But, for me, I think it's kind of brilliant because, building confidence is such a part of the process of building health and performance. So why wouldn't you welcome a positive connection with the outcome that you're trying to create? So that's kind of where I start. And then if they still look at me like I'm a little, too far out in some spiritual la la land, or, because they're already, coming into something new by just interacting with me. Yeah. So if that part of the conversation doesn't go into like a bigger conversation about the connection of the brain and the body and the mind, I kind of just like step back a little bit and say, okay, when are we going to start the real education process here so that they can kind of start putting all this stuff together?
There is a definite, I think, art and skill set to that communication to be able to talk about that stuff in a way that doesn't seem off-putting to whoever you're talking to, depending on who they are. And the way I bridge that gap is by being very, very vulnerable about my history with my mental health, my experiences with trying to figure out my own body, being a professional athlete whose career was cut short because of injury, and then dealing with the subsequent identity issues after the fact of, okay, what do I do now? I had this facade of being immortal, essentially physically, by ignoring a lot of warning signs that were in my body, because that's what I was taught to do. And now how do I switch this and really kind of deal with being a bulletproof person. Yeah, my body isn't feeling right. I need to address some things instead of just pushing through it and getting to a point where I've just broke myself further. Mm-hmm. So I share that. I'm happy to, and I'm happy to share the work I did after I was done playing to deal with some of that stuff, because it's a lot of work, and not everyone needs to do that. Mm-hmm. I did, but by being able to share that confidently, it allows me to connect with whoever I'm working with on their level, mm-hmm. and it makes them feel safe. And again, not everyone needs it, but a lot of people do, because mm-hmm. emotional trauma will always manifest in some sort of physical sensation in your body, whether it's tightness or something else, like you clench a jaw, and if tightness is a protective mechanism in your body and it's always there because something psychological going on, you may be missing something in terms of getting someone as well as they could be, or getting them to perform as well as they could be, or understanding that maybe you need to refer out to somebody who really can help them in a different way before they get to you.
I heard this analogy he was not talking to me, but Dr. Peter Attia on his podcast. It's called The Drive. And he was talking to, I don't know if it was his friend, but he's an author he's a psychiatrist, and he writes about trauma, healing from trauma, and kind of, I want to say it's new age compared to most psychiatry practices. And he knows it because when he speaks at these conferences, he says the fact that he's even bringing up trauma in a psychiatry environment was very surprising to everyone in the audience. So it feels very new age on his end. But the analogy that they were going through to kind of explain how we can address trauma that is really psychologically holding people back. So, you and I are looking at the physical sometimes and being like, well, there's this whole other thing in the background that you're not even aware of, right? And it's influencing mm-hmm. you on many levels, day in and day out. And that analogy was that, psychological and emotional trauma is kind of like an abscess. And an abscess protects itself with, inflammation and infection, and not protects itself with inflammation, but it puts a barrier around the inflammation and the infection to keep it there, so it doesn't mm-hmm. go everywhere. But they said when you're treating it in a medical way, and Peter Attia has done some, very medical hands-on things, right? And he said when you're treating it, that it gets a little worse before it can actually heal and get better, because the infection's coming out and it didn't want to come out. Like the body wanted mm-hmm. to contain that area. And I said, wow, that does kind of work for the emotional stuff. I kind of got it. And then I was thinking that it could even work for, on the in the mechanical level of, when somebody is starting to resolve their issue around their hip or their knee or their toe, whatever it is, it might get a little worse before it gets better. And I thought it was kind of a good analogy to share with people. I'm just pondering it. You got any thoughts on that? Should I start preaching?
Because you may open some floodgates that were buried off for a long time, and then they have to go through a healing process themselves to deal with that. I mean, trauma can layer itself down deep and deep and have protective barrier over protective barrier and protective barrier. And yeah, sometimes when you open that up and open that box up, something's going to come out because it needs to. I mean, if you could hold it in forever, but you're going to have, energy issues, you're going to have flow issues, you're going to have all sorts of things, and you may never heal if you don't address some of that stuff. I know personally, again, and I'm going to talk about myself because that's what I have as a resource. Essentially, that's my experience. The injuries that I had as an athlete didn't go away until I started dealing with that stuff. I had surgeries, and I felt the same pain after the surgeries than I did before I had the surgeries. And I go, okay, so surgeries I had should have fixed this problem. I should go get back to where I want to go, but I was getting injured the exact same way as before. And by the way, that added a whole nother layer of emotional issues at that point with the frustrations of that, which is how I got into this industry in the first place, because I knew there was something going on that wasn't correct. the depth of how deep it can get seated in there, you don't even realize, because, a lot of it gets stored up in your body from an age that you don't have a memory of it. So yeah, if you really want to address some of that stuff, you have to go into some deep dives and open up be vulnerable enough to open up some doors and take a peek inside, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So now I'm going to jump all the way into right into a training session, and you're now the facilitator of this training session. So if you're working with an athlete and you both have agreed that there is some kind of emotional trauma, jumping into the picture and creating, something like some kind of barrier to their performance, do you do some graded exposure and try to build their confidence?
I stay within my scope of practice, that's for sure. I do a little bit of a cognitive assessment, whether they know it or not, and I engage it just from how we're communicating and the type of responses that they give me. And there's one or two ways to address it. If there is an issue, I have no issue communicating it with them. And if they don't respond well to it, then it's got to be driven by them, for one. They may just have limits in what their performance could be. Because for me, the opportunity for great performance, and I say this to them square up, is wellness has to be the baseline, mental and physical. And if you have beat up joints and you're inflamed all the time, your opportunity for performance is going to go down. If you're beat up and inflamed from a mental and emotional standpoint all the time, your performance may not be what it could be also. So you may want to address that. I do have some, again, tools that are within my scope, that I feel that are my scope, depending on who I'm working with, that I play with. But if it's deeper than that, then I refer out, because that might be the best thing for them before they can get to where they need to go.
Oh yeah. I had that conversation this week.
It's all about how you communicate with them. It's not like, hey man, you need help. You don't do that. It's just that's the trust that gets built up over time between you as their practitioner and you guys working together on whatever their goals may be. It's easier with someone that you've been working with, but yeah, it's an important conversation, and it's important to be confident in having that type of conversation with whoever you want to help, I think. Because this day and age, especially, mental health is so prominent at the forefront of a lot of things, and it's not a demonized thing anymore. You're not weak for saying that you need help with something. You're a lot stronger now for doing that, because it's just everywhere, right? Everyone's got it. The world's a crazy place at the moment. So it's easier to bridge that gap from a conversation standpoint. And then you take that one step further from pro athlete. Because I was a pro athlete and a professional coach, I have an easier time communicating that on that level. And I think more often than not, I get positive feedback from them, being able to share those experiences, because when you share it and they know that I've done it, they're open to sharing it as well, right? Because they get it. Now you get someone from Microsoft who has foot issues, or whatever, and can't stop running. They need to go for a run. I have to go for a run, but then they hurt themselves running, and now they go. You wonder, okay, why did you need to always go for a run in the first place? And a lot of times it's a psychological issue, overthinking, narrative-based things that are going on their brain on nonstop. And when they get their heart rate to a certain level, then the thinking stops, because they're in a different mode physiologically, and they need to do that. And now that they're hurt because they've done it, blown past their thresholds, now they're rehab. Let's get it fixed right now. It's okay, we need to actually address what the real glitch is. It's something wrong here. Yeah,
I feel like, you do some work in CrossFit, populations. I'm sure that would be it. That's a prime location for that to
Well, here's one to give CrossFit. I make CrossFit's a sport, so we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Especially my experience with the people I work with is a fantastic community, a very, very supportive people, and they love that part of it. It's a big deal. But like any athlete, they are beating the crud out of their joints, and it's also a quick hit to get to that kind of exhaustion phase, so they can get out of their head as well. So I bring that up with the CrossFitters I work with, and I work with a spectrum of them. I work with some that are world champions and some that are more recreational, but it's the same conversation.
Yeah. I know. I want to talk to that master champion guy you work with. I want some tips. Amazing. Not that I do anything close to what he's doing, but I'm wow, he's got to know something.
And he also has it down in business, and he's something else. Yeah.
That's cool.
Different level. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like you guys have a good relationship. No, I asked, I don't know when this episode's coming out, but there's an episode coming out on Think Fit, Be Fit with a neighborly friend of mine. Her name is Dr. Lauren Fisher, and she's a psychologist. And I said, does fitness need to be trauma informed going forward? What do you think?
Mm.
I don't remember what she said. You're going to have to listen. So,
well, if holistic training is a thing and people claim they're doing it, they better be addressing that part of it.
Yeah.
I think holistic, just like activation, is a bastardized word that people don't really understand what that means. It's just buzzword, sound bites at this point. There's a lack of education in it, what it really means to each person. And even if you think you understand it, how do you interpret that information or data and utilize it in a positive way that helps this person? Those are different levels of skills and mastery of your craft. So, but it's something that needs to be, there's scientific data on it. It's not like made up stuff. Mm-hmm. Mind body is not a fake thing.
No, it's like, for me, like a great time to just be in this space of one going, I'm turning 40 in a couple months. And like, we're in a generation of people that are like, okay, well, I want to perform as I age. And I've got multiple ways to make that happen instead of just kind of rolling over and saying, I'm just going to hurt. I've got arthritis. It's too stressful. I have to do this. And I think it's a real honor. So I really like highlighting that whole, like, just mindset that we're like a first generation of people that are aging with like a choice of how successful and how good we want to feel. And it's freaking amazing. Hello, Jennifer here. If you're enjoying this episode and are hungry for more mental reps about exercising efficiently and effectively, make sure to check out the other shows in our network, Peach Pit Fitness and Fitness for Consumption. We explore it all, from celebrity workout trends to peer-reviewed research. Focus on what really matters, synthesizing accurate information into meaningful action for you and your clients. Enhance your fitness mindset and process by listening to all Think Fit, Be Fit podcast at thinkfitbefitpodcast.com or on your favorite podcast player. Thanks for your support and enjoy the rest of the episode. Kind of want to shift over to talking about collecting data, using it in your training decisions and your thought process. I'm curious because, as you know, like my business has grown and I'm now like mentoring and teaching an employee how to think and be a critical thinker. And, you're one of those people I can ask, how do you think critically? So I guess where are you at this point in like using technology and collecting like data points with your populations?
Yeah, that's I'm very active in that now for a couple of reasons. Having your eyes open enough to know that local problems don't always require local solutions in your body. You got to think a little bit more well-rounded and be able to explore and look other places to see what is leading to that particular sensation that you don't like, that needs to be changed. So data, Greg Mack's brilliant at teaching this stuff, like different types of measurements, different type of control positions, what type of outputs can you use? From dynamometers to get up and using the machine. Everyone has access to their weights. That's the first step of data collection, is you can actually measure the weights that you're lifting. And as long as you understand the machines you're using, all that stuff, you can take a Tom Purvis class and figure that out. But it all just gives you a better idea of where you want to start to try to fix a solution or create a solution for a potential problem, or at least some starting point. Right? It doesn't mean you want to adapt off that, but you need to figure out, where do I start with this human, from everyone's different intake, everyone's different injury history, psychological, like we're talking about, and then I add in the actual technical data components to it. It's now you can start to create a picture of where we want to start. It may not be completely accurate, but it's better than just hoping. I've got different devices now for, again, measuring output. There's the Tendo units where you can measure how fast you can do these contractions, concentric and eccentric. Just have from a sports background, I have a technology that measures speed and agility and different deceleration rates, all that stemming from an initial intake and mobility profile of what is this person presenting as in different configurations, and what is their control overall.
Mm-hmm.
To ultimately address what their goal is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's all that matters.
I think, yeah. Well, I mean, I'd like to point out the opposite, which is what most, especially in the athletic training scope, they walk up to the trainer, let's say, or the trainer. And they're like, okay, what's wrong with you? And they just go down this list of what's tight, what's the FMS, calling out different inefficiencies with it being very arbitrary. And, I think a lot of that came from the FMS, where it's oh, because you're an athlete, we're just going to assume you have multiple things wrong with you because you stress your body. And not to say that there might be some truth into we get beat up by playing sports. There's truth in that, but it's not true that we can improve just by focusing on those weaknesses. It's we can improve by, the weaknesses are definitely a part of it, but does it always have to be such a negative takeaway from it? I don't. Yeah, I'm hoping that's the case, that it can be. I don't know. I try my hardest to frame it in a way that we can get information and look at and get dialed in information, and then look at the bigger picture. And then honestly, sometimes I just congratulate people from wow, you are compensating really well. This is great.
Mm-hmm.
Can we work from there? Yeah.
Yeah. We got to take the data and accept it for what it is. Sometimes also it's just information, and then how you use that information can be positive or negative as well. Okay. Because for years in pro sports, there's been data collection going on, and you're making, and I've heard it firsthand, massive inferences about what that data means about a person, even though you haven't done anything more to explore that or have any idea what that is. That actually accurate, or are you just saying something kind of, you're created that inference? You don't know that for a fact.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, again, in the sports world, jobs are affected by that type of stuff. So I know there's reluctance in certain sports to have data collection because it affects their contracts and how much money they make, because look at these numbers. And again, it just depends on the eye of the beholder, whoever has that information, and what they're choosing to do with it. Just like any other piece of information, it can be used for a positive thing, or you can be completely wrong. And I think there needs to be a humbleness to data collection as well. It's okay, this is what I'm looking at. It still doesn't mean I'm right.
Mm-hmm.
This is where we're going to explore, but it doesn't mean I'm completely accurate with what I'm looking at. Because there's always another layer to that lens that you can get further and further into that might be affecting it. So there's always little ticking things in there that you can't see, and just so you got to proceed with appropriate caution, I suppose, with what you're doing.
Well, luckily, in one way, a lot of people aren't operating with a whole lot of information about their body.
Mm-hmm.
In one way, that's dumb luck. It's good luck to have little information about what's going on. And then on the other hand, you get all this information, and then you have a whole new responsibility.
You've done that to that point where, okay, you start doing MAT on people, and you first start, you're taking the course for the first time, and you're like, oh, you don't want to stretch, you don't want to do that, and then people are like, what the hell can I do? Or they're so afraid to shut a muscle down that they don't do anything anymore. It's no, that wasn't the right idea either. Because I experienced that myself as an athlete. I was getting treated, and I was like, I don't want to work out because I don't want anything to be shut down. But it's well, how the hell am I supposed to do my sport? I'm too weak, because I stopped working out. And I literally did that and for me personally, it wasn't necessarily an MAT issue. It was my head issue again. Now that created a fear. I don't want to feel pain anymore. So I don't want to do anything that causes pain for me. Working out the way I was, which was the biggest problem. It was the inappropriate loading that I was doing, the inappropriate dosage that I was doing that caused the pain, not the exercise, the whole exercise itself. I needed to rethink and relearn how to exercise my body. I didn't need treatment. I needed to train better.
Yeah. I was definitely super sketch with my body when I first started getting treated. I was like, oh, yeah, how am I going to keep it within the limits? How am I going to do that? And like that, but I have to say, like, that sent me on quite a rabbit hole. And I had multiple shovels in that hole. It was like, protect everything, joint integrity is everything. And then like one layer of that for me was identity related to an injury. But the other layers were just like, I was running around with an old story about my bones being weak. And I never even had a DEXA scan. Whoa, where did I get that from? Like,
correct. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Something or somebody implanted that in there, and practitioners do that all the time, either deliberately or not deliberately. They can create a fear and they don't know it.
Yeah.
This is the communication pathway that really needs to get ironed out and cleaned up.
Yeah.
You tell somebody that they're weak and they can take that personally, and their solution that they have for not being weak anymore is to do a lot more. And that's not what they necessarily need. There's the communication of what that stuff means really, really needs to be tailored to the individual receiving that information.
Personally, like, I would even say I shine in this area where I get to educate the client. And I'm like, oh, here's the moment, where we can cross that bridge together. And yeah, I mean, and when it works, it's not an immediate gratification, but if they come back 3 weeks later and they've used that information in a good, positive way, or an appropriate, I don't want to say positive, then it's a huge freaking win. My
favorite tool is my whiteboard with dry erase marker.
Yeah.
I'll use it in the middle of sessions. If I'm training Major League Baseball players, I'll have them come over. I'm like, hey, look, this is what we're looking for. Okay. When you do this exercise, I'll draw the muscle. I want you to visualize this going from here to here, or whatever, potentially, or whatever the goal is, and make it like you guys are really clear with this part, right? Like we need to be on the same page. If the desired outcome is something that I deem to be really specific, it's not always that way, but it can be a really, really useful tool when they just don't quite get it. And hopefully conceptually they start to pick it up and understand it, so they feel safer training themselves and take power back. Yeah, I'm going to say that. Take power back to have the confidence to take care of themselves and not be reliant on a version of a treatment.
Yeah. I mean, I think you do give away a power when you say, I need this treatment. I need this ice pack.
No doubt.
Whatever. Yeah. So I'd say that's like the right way to use it. Yeah. The question that comes up for me is, when you are educating people, do you create a posture, like a scenario where they are looking at the body, or at anatomy and physiology, let's say, teaching them about their anatomy and physiology, like putting the narrative into their body, or taking the narrative to like more lecture, like, oh, this is how the body moves, and A to B is what we're focusing on? Or is it in your body, we're looking at A to B, and this is what's supposed to feel like? Is that a good question?
The answer is yes. And it depends on who they are and how they learn. And I ask that question. Are you a visual learner? Are you kinesthetic? What do you vibe with? I try it in different ways. I'll use metaphors that apply to their occupation or whatever is important in their life, just to get it to resonate. I'll say it 5 different ways. I'll pull the skeleton over. I'll pull out apps and say, here's what you look like with your skin off. Here's what it should feel like. It depends on what they need. I go for everything. Because the most important part for me is I'm conceptually understanding what I'm trying to get across to keep it safe so they can progress the right way.
Yeah, conceptually understand what I'm saying.
It's not their job to learn all the stuff, but you need to be able to teach it enough in a way where they get it and they have trust in you and you trust them that they're able to help themselves and progress. Especially if you're prescribing homework.
Yeah. Hardest thing ever, by the way.
And that you're going to have to tell them the same thing 15 times, and it's okay because it's not their wheelhouse. They have to learn it. They need reps in learning that. Just like any motor skill. I mean, it takes reps and intention to learn it until it progresses in your brain and nervous system to a point where it doesn't require any thinking at all. But you have to start with a certain point and then progress into it. People like athletes that do things without thinking. They've done it enough where the information doesn't even really go to the brain. It goes to the spinal cord and back to the muscle. So it doesn't seem like they're thinking, but they just do it. That's any sort of learning.
What else, I guess, is in your toolbox? Things that you're using that we haven't brought up? Whiteboard, measurement, data.
Well, I'm trying to do the iPad and use the Apple Pencil, but my handwriting's so terrible.
I don't like the Apple Pencil. Yeah, here's mine. It's right here. It's dead.
I'm going to use it because I bought it, but
yeah,
I'm trying so hard. It's just, it's time inefficient. Aside from different, recovery modalities, we have, the hyperbaric chamber, we have the sauna, we have different PEMF devices that people seem to have positive feedback with, infrared technologies and things of that nature that, again, people seem to like also seems to work for me. Obviously, I want to understand what's going on a little bit with what the idea is, but there's so much new stuff out there that, again, requires more data and more trials and more to really understand what's going on.
Yeah. I feel like you have a pulse on that stuff, though.
Yeah.
Or like the people around you do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm using the words very, very appropriately. It seems to work. People seem to like it.
Yeah.
That's I am hard pressed to say absolutes in this industry, because the body is so adaptive. Like, your nervous system is different moment to moment, and it might have worked one day, and next day just your body didn't respond that way like it did the first time.
Yeah.
Or your experience with it wasn't as positive that time. Now you actually don't. You're kind of iffy if it does work for you, and that's a big deal too. Or it was great, and now you're hell bent on doing it every day for the rest of your life, to the point where you're going to go buy a hyperbaric chamber and put it in your basement and sleep in it and do all that stuff. Like, this all feeds back into the psychological part of it, and because what you're believing, the mental to the physical is a real thing.
Hey, man, I sit there with my red light almost every day. We talk back and forth, and he seems to be doing a good job for me. So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know what you mean. I always kind of like just say, hey, I buy all this stuff just to encourage your body to turn on the healing dial up, to recover. These are the things that I think can help. Mostly I buy them because they worked for me first. And that's, sometimes that's all the information they get. I'm like, okay, try it.
Yeah. But this affects your mitochondria, and this one helps your mitochondria, and that's the solution for everything in the world.
I tried to read a book about mitochondria. It's called like Sex, Death, and Mitochondria or something, literally. Hold on, it's on my Audible. It was so hard, and I could not follow along. So I just stopped talking about mitochondria because I was not doing anyone any favors.
I think the bottom line is that your entire being is a system of systems, and they need to interrelate appropriately. And if one's down, something else is going to compensate. Something's going to change. So the real goal, whether that's recovery or how you train or whatever, it's optimizing whatever needs to be optimized to help the whole thing work better. And then you got to assess and figure out what that is too. What needs to be worked on the most. So your experience of life is a lot better.
I wanted to ask you, I think I tried to ask this last time, but I didn't get to it. So this is totally like we're turning left here. We're on a different highway.
I like to do four lefts.
4 lefts. Yeah. What has translated for you from working with soccer players to Major League Baseball players?
All of it. And I would say, for one, my experience in the professional realm, that being a player, that being a coach, that being part of a medical staff, that part, being a strength coach, and being in rooms and meetings with all those different hats on and looking at players from all those viewpoints allows me to communicate and speak in methods and ways that these guys really understand, that I understand what they're going through. The zeros at the end of their paychecks were a lot different than mine. They had several more. then what I was able to build through my soccer platform and integrating biomechanical analysis and different things like that, it was a pretty, not simple, but it wasn't too difficult to transition that kind of process over to baseball, because the human movement, for the most part, it's all pretty dang similar once you understand what the parameters are on it. Also, my process, if I'm going to learn about something, I'm going to learn about something. So I spend a lot of time up at hitting cages with professional hitting coaches, professional pitching coaches. I travel to Utah to work with a guy who runs something called biokinetics, and he does all sorts of digitization of pitching and hitting from a three-dimensional standpoint with live action. So he'll set cameras up in a stadium and actually film these guys. He'll put the measuring cube out there and get not just data, but real life data from what their appropriate arousal levels would be with a crowd, and say, okay, here's what your metrics look like when you're at this level.
Oh, like arousal.
And then,
like being aroused, like mentally aroused. Yeah.
Yeah, because you have to hit a certain arousal level. And, if you read textbooks, the appropriate level, I think, is from 60 to 70%. Because if you go too high, then you get too emotional and too amped up. If you're too low, you don't have the right output to do what you need to do. So right in that zone is where you're kind of able to think calm and clearly, but you're still in that kind of ready to go phase, which affects what you do. And I know that from, again, playing days and research and all that kind of stuff. So having all that kind of background and the mechanics background, and then having these communications with these guys and kind of being bought in and learning with them, and then knowing that I'm learning with them, and that's just kind of how it's transitioned. Yeah.
That's super cool. It's like the coactive learning together.
Oh yeah.
All the cool stuff you said. That was my favorite.
Well, it started with what I know and what I've developed and worked on, and applying some of those concepts and methodologies to, again, the parameters of what they have to do. And it wasn't too hard to figure that part out. And then really diving in and researching and learning about the stuff that I didn't know all that much about. And then again, integrating all that together. And now it's turned into whatever it is now.
Whatever it is now.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you professionally developing? Like what's on the horizon for your brand?
Again, expanding with bringing in new people. I don't know if we were recording when I said this, but the positive out of the negative of being injured and having your career cut short was that I transitioned into coaching at a really young age, and people that I've coached have now gone through their playing careers and are interested in learning about the stuff that I've developed. And those are the type of people that I'm training. So I have former high-level players and professionals that are interested in this process. And so I try to guide them and help them develop. And now there's enough of them where I can expand and try to help more people in an appropriate way. So camps and things like that, or whatever we need to do. And that's the next step in doing that in multiple markets, hopefully.
Do you have anybody on the East Coast?
Not yet. No, I'm only to Chicago right now.
Okay. Nice. Yeah. All right. Well, I hope you get a little map and you start pinpointing it, because that's awesome. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
Well, I have to wrap this up. It's been amazing, growing together and, keeping the communication lines open. And honestly, to be able to, express and share the growing pains that I have and the thinking pains that I have, is very special to me. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you. And I think it'll make a good conversation. Where can people reach you if you want to be reached?
Instagram at Dragavon Performance.
Yep.
My last name is interesting. Dragavon.
Mm-hmm.
I think my website is dragavonperformance.com. I should know that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also on the website athletictraininginstitute.com. And I don't do Twitter. I might have one. I'm not doing it.
No.
Facebook, I have one. I don't do it. I've been doing signing that thing for years, which is just fine.
Instagram, that's where the party is. I get it.
Oh, I like pictures.
Yeah. All right. Well, you're gonna get some puppy pictures from me soon.
Sweet. Love it.
Okay,
Love
sweet. Yeah. Say no more. All right, man. Thank you so much.
Cool.
All right.
Good to talk to you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening and being a part of the Think Fit, Be Fit podcast network. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with your friends and family. If you're interested in further resources, check out or visit our website, thinkfitbefitpodcast.com.